While living in a halfway house, you must abide by certain rules. There's no drugs or alcohol of any kind. You must sign in and sign out, and you must attend a minimum of one NA and or AA meeting a day. My roommate Nick and I had an agreement. I would buy him groceries because he didn't have a job, and he would provide rides to meetings for me. I was unable to drive legally, but we'll get to that. Now, I grew up in a household where my parents wouldn't even start the car until everyone was wearing their seatbelt. But as Nick got into drive and revved up the engine, I thought, I need to be cooler in front of my new friends. And sometimes that means not wearing a seatbelt, like a nerd. It was a normal fall day in Jacksonville, Florida. Nothing stood out. As we made our way to the meeting, I thought about how lucky I was to have been given yet another chance in life. We'll get to that later. As we drove towards the beach side, we came over the bridge on Atlantic Avenue, made the right onto Florida Road. And as we came around a bend in the road, I spotted them. 2 Neptune Beach police officers pulled over with their lights on. They just pointed at Nick and told him, pull over, pull over. And all I thought was, oh no. Because Neptune Beach is a wealthier township, but it has very little crime. So a lot of times the police will just post up on the side of the road, pulling cars over for all sorts of things. Speeding, failure to yield, and yes, even seatbelt violations. For most of you, this would be as simple as getting a ticket. One problem. Years prior, I had skipped town on my very first DUI. 6 months into a year sentence of probation, classes, and fines. The state of Florida frowns upon that. As the officers approached the vehicle, I played out every scenario in my head. Fight, run, play the fool, a warrant. Me? Are you out of your mind? They asked for my ID. I told them that this was the land of the free and the home of the brave, and Francis Scott Key says, I don't have to show you anything. They then showed me the statute. Florida state law requires seatbelts for all passengers, which means a ticket. And the ticket requires an ID. They just kept repeating back to me, ID, sir. ID, sir. Sir, ID. I gave it to them. They went back to the car. When you're waiting for the other shoe to drop, time can draw out like a blade. Thought back to my first DUI. I honestly don't think it was that big of a deal. Drinking and driving is horrible, but more for the things that happen when you're inebriated behind the wheel. I got mine because, okay, this is going to sound like I'm justifying it, but I got mine because I was with a girl. Yeah. So it had been 2 years since I stopped playing college football. I'd gained over 100 pounds. I was drinking every day, and I constantly was getting in trouble at work. So when a female coworker said she would love to go to the bar with me, I was a little shocked. Had a little bit too much to drink, but then she said she wanted to come back to my apartment, so it was on. There's no way I was not driving. We got into my car, and then I stopped at a red light. Everything was fine. I figured we got some time to kill. Made my move. Started kissing. I looked up. The light was green. As soon as I rolled through the light, whoop, whoop. Do you have any idea how drunk you are right now, sir? We have been following you since you left the bar. It's nothing like the first time. I was thinking about all this in the moments after I handed my ID over to the police. I knew I was going to jail. I was aware I was facing 9 counts of violation of probation. The 6 months I never checked in, the 2 classes I did not attend, and not paying the fine. I was staring at them through the side mirror of the truck. It wasn't just a DUI anymore. There were so many more charges. Still, in my head, I thought, worst case scenario, I'm going to get arrested, but I'm definitely going to figure it out. As I thought this, they swiftly pulled their guns and approached the passenger side of the vehicle. My side. With standard issue Beretta 9mm pointed at me, they commanded, step out of the vehicle slowly. Put your hands on your head and interlock your fingers. It was just like the movies. Get on your knees and put your stomach on the ground. I followed every command. Now, this was not the first time I had been arrested, and nor would it be the last time, but it was the most terrifying. I was cuffed and put in the back of the squad car. Then, like all of that didn't just happen, one of the officers turned to me and asked, "Is there anyone you need to call?" There was no going home that night. I was taken to Duval County Jail, where I would await transport to go to Palm Beach County and see a judge. On transfer day, they crammed us into a tiny van. We would go all around the state, dropping off and picking up inmates. Now, in this van, some would call it inhumane. Not me. I have the utmost respect for the police now, but some would call it inhumane. A 4-hour trip took 36 hours. The last 4 hours, they moved us from the van into a bus. And this was cool because we could lift our heads and stretch out our legs. We were even given permission to talk to one another. I noticed the gentleman next to me had on a baby blue jumpsuit. And he was a little guy, like 5'6", 150 pounds. Being the naturally inquisitive person I am, I started a conversation with him. "Hey, man, what's up with the blue?" "Well, I'm from Zephyr Hills. It's the prison, upstate. I'm just heading back to the county to face my appeal." Now, I was pre-law. I had every intention to go to law school, so I knew an appeal meant he might be getting out soon. So I was excited for him. "Man, an appeal? You might be out tomorrow." It's a little trickier with double murder. Needless to say, I wanted to go back in the van. I just kept thinking, I'm not supposed to be here. While in the holding cells, waiting to go in front of the judge, I met a man named Tyrone. Now, he had been in and out of the system since he was 14 years old. And Tyrone told me when he figured out what I was doing there that I'd probably be going home soon. Actually, what he said was, "Man, white boy like you going to be out tomorrow. You free, man. You went to college." So this filled me with so much excitement. And I went in front of the judge like, "What's up now, man? Let's go. Let's hear that sentence, judge. Time served, going home. What's up? What's up?" And then he said 9 months. But wait. Tyrone. How did I get here? Let's go back. Before jail, before rehab, before all of that. It was 6 months into my first DUI. I was now biking to school because the state took my license. See, I told you we'd get there. It wasn't that bad. I had a very good bike. I'd listen to my favorite podcast, The After Disaster, to pass the time. And I would always ride on the sidewalk because I was afraid of the cars and the real bicyclists on the main road. And one morning, I was running late for a Spanish final. And I remember I was flying down the sidewalk. But I was still paying enough attention to everybody where I thought I was being pretty safe. I came to a major intersection, and as I went through it, bam, a car going about 30 miles an hour hit me. I ended up with a herniated disc in my back, bulging discs in my neck, severe sprain in my ACL, and a concussion. There was hospital visits and doctor's offices, physical therapy, and a 2-year legal battle, all while drinking every single day. By the time it was over, I was done at FAU, and my life had fallen apart in South Florida. So I made the most reasonable decision to move back home to Daytona Beach. Now, I settled for an amount that's not life-changing, but it definitely could have set me up. Because, again, we're talking about Daytona Beach. It took almost 2 years from the day until my lawyers had a check in hand. Now, I had them overnight it to my parents' house because at the time I was staying with a friend who I knew would never ask me to stop drinking. I was staying in his living room on a lawn chair. I remember the check came in on a Saturday, and when I knew it was on its way, I made more permanent living arrangements. A friend of mine that I was actually working for knew someone who had a vacant apartment above their store in downtown Daytona. I insisted when it came in for my parents to drive the 30 minutes to bring it to me. And again, Saturday, no banks are open. I'm not going to be able to cash this check, but I was still like, I need this check. This is almost $30,000. Like, I need this money. So they brought it to me. I took a city bus to an Amscot, and I slammed the check on the counter. "Can I have my money, please?" They laughed at me because it's not a bank. It's a check cashing store. And I tried to give them a check for almost $30,000. What they ended up giving me was $3,000 in cash, 21 money orders for $1,000 each. It's Monopoly. It's not real. It's Monopoly money. And then they took their cut, which was $2,000. Yeah. And I said, deal. Let's go. I need this. I had money to spend now, though. So instead of taking the city bus home, I called a yellow cab. Yeah. Balling out of control. They sent me a driver named Dane. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever seen Game of Thrones. Dane looked like Giant's Bane. Real big dude, huge red beard, big red hair. Well, he looked like Giant's Bane ate Giant's Bane because he was super duper fat, but he was cool. I had him take me to the only place I knew to go with all this money in a new apartment, Walmart. I spent almost $2,000 on TVs, gaming systems, different things for the house. Yeah. I asked Dane how much he made on a good day. $300. So boom, I pulled it out right then and there. $300 to be my bodyguard / driver for the day. We partied together that whole night. By Monday, the friend that I was working for convinced me to take the money orders to a real bank and deposit them. I remember being in a little bit of a panic because they said it would take 2 to 3 days to process. And obviously, I was already out of all that cash. By Thursday, though, I had my money. I would start the night by calling Dane every time. And he always agreed to be my driver for the evening / bodyguard for his $300 fee. I always would spend the first hour running errands, like getting booze and drugs and just making sure everything was ready to go for the night. And then I would beg Dane to take me to Lollipops, which was the best strip club in Daytona. It was the best. He always talked me into going to this place called Biggins. Yep. No G on the end. Biggins. Biggins. He said, we should go to Biggins because Lollipops, the girls are stuck up. And at Biggins, they're sweeter. Yeah. Every time I'd go, I would change $200 in ones every time and just throw it in the air. I've arrived. I would pay for 3 to 5 dances with the girls that I liked. And then when we'd go in the back room, I would just ask them about their lives and what their goals were. Yeah. They never actually danced. A few days into this bender, I drunkenly quit that job with my friend. I called Dane. We went on another shopping spree, this time to Best Buy, getting a little classier. I bought a laptop, random stuff, and I also bought gifts for one of the girls that worked at the tanning salon next to the building I was living above. Hammered, I presented the gifts. A couple minutes later, I got a call from the owner of said tanning salon saying I was making his employees uncomfortable. Yeah, and I was now banned. I didn't pay off the DUI fines. I didn't pay off my student debt. I didn't pay off any other bills. I had paid for my apartment 6 months in advance, so I would just party every day. One night, I went to watch football at the local bar, and it was the first game of the season, 2012. I'll never forget it. My good friend that I had played college football with, Alfred Morris, went from a 6th-round pick to starting for the Washington football team. And I announced to the entire bar, if Alfred Morris scores a touchdown in his debut game, I will buy everyone in here a round. And that son of a bitch did. I remember getting the check, $987. It was $987. But at the time, I remember thinking, that's it? After 28 days, I checked my bank account, and I was negative $157. I had tried to get my job back, but my friend had had enough. I couldn't even get a job back at the restaurant that I had worked at since I was 18. I'd burned too many bridges. For the next couple of months, I barely scraped by, just surviving. I had no money left, no friends, no real belonging. I was beginning to go through alcohol withdrawals when I couldn't afford booze. My nervous system betrayed me, and my hands would shake. My brain started to turn on me as well. I was having seizures and horrible headaches. The friend I found in alcohol as a senior in high school was quickly becoming my enemy. I thought about killing myself, but when I stood on the balcony of my apartment and just looked down, I remember thinking, I can't do this. One time I did lay down on the ground underneath that balcony and I called 911. And I said, help, I've fallen and I'm paralyzed. When the EMT showed up, they just, hey kid, we do this for a living. We know how people fall, and it's not like that. Sorry, guys, sorry. I just went back upstairs. Finally, I reached out to the one person I knew would still take my calls, my cousin Tom. Tom and I were as close as you can be with a cousin that always lived 2 hours drive time away. But in the summers, we would spend time together. And when I was 12 years old, Tom introduced me to stand-up comedy. Tom was doing Teach for America in Oklahoma City. He said I could live with him rent-free and do comedy up there almost every night. I was living the dream, but I was doing it poorly. I was drunk on stage most nights, so I could never keep a cohesive set together. It was a lot of running the light and Arnold Schwarzenegger impersonations. Don't give me the light. You come get me off the stage. Other comics don't like that. The shakes got worse. I could no longer even function without 1 or 2 shots for breakfast. Now, shots for breakfast is a time-honored tradition for me, but now it's becoming necessary to get out of bed without shaking or throwing up. My brain also got worse. One day I had a seizure in the middle of my shift at the restaurant, and I was rushed to the ER in an ambulance. They said I had given myself alcohol poisoning. They referred me to a neurologist. After countless tests, he came back with a laundry list of issues. Football and drinking had taken a much greater toll than I was prepared to pay. The party was over. I was officially broken. I stopped for about a week. At this point, Tom decided to intervene, knowing comedy was the most important thing to me, and now worried for my well-being. He said if I could stay sober, right, and actually acted like I cared, for 30 days, he'd start using his sway in the scene to get me booked on real shows. This was it. This was my time to shine. Comedy is the most important thing to me in my life, so this wouldn't be hard. I made it 28 days. Again. Just 28. 2 days away from our deal, and I was drinking again. Alone in the back room of the apartment. When Tom walked back there and saw me, drunk, watching Burn Notice on my tiny phone screen, he just had one question. What happened? Not in a judgmental way, because Tom never judged me, but in a curious way. This is killing you. You're going to die. Why? For what? For the first time, I was honest. I don't know. But I won't stop. Because I can't stop. Within 48 hours, with the help of my parents, I was on a plane to Jacksonville, Florida, to go to rehab. The first time I went to rehab, they taught me that alcoholism is a disease. It's recognized by the American Medical Association and everything. They also introduced me to the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is something I'd only kind of listened to in the back of the few meetings I had attended up until now. I met some amazing people. Some of them I'm still friends with to this day. Others I was friends with until their dying day. Because that's the thing about making friends in the program. You are going to have to bury a few of them. I started doing the work. The first few days are tough. Coming down off booze is something that can kill you. Heroin addicts will tell you it's heroin, but they're liars, obviously. They do heroin. That's right. Coming off heroin is terrible. It's called dope sick, but it won't actually kill you. Booze will. So they give you all these medications to keep you from dying, but they also make you very tired and sick. I am by nature hyper-competitive. So I treated rehab like sports. Show up early, stay late, share in meetings, start the steps, do the work. Anything I could do to get the booze monkey off my back. And it worked too, because I worked it. I started attending the workout hour, and in our free time, we'd play board games and have karaoke nights. When the chips were down, we would all rally behind each other. It was the closest I had been with a group of people since I had left football. It was the same, really. A group of people trying to accomplish one common goal. That was a great 42 days. But after that, I had to move on, which meant a new living situation. When you live in a halfway house, you have to follow certain rules. Do you guys see what I did there? How I took the beginning part and then I just put it right there? Did you see that? That took me like 6 months to figure out. So we're back in Palm Beach County. Now, I had an eerie sense of calmness when I was finally sentenced. It was all over. Now I just had to do the time. What I learned is there's a give and take from what you expect to happen in jail and what you've seen on movies and television. There are constant fights in my experience, and you do need to prove you're not a punk right out of the gate. But you do become accustomed to it after a while. I was terrified the first time the door slammed shut behind me in my new home for the coming months. But after a few scuffles and making jokes, I just fell in line with everybody else. Now, I remind you, this is jail, not prison. They're different. So prison is for anyone who's serving 1 year plus 1 day. In prisons, you have more freedom to move about within the structure, but you're also being housed with people from 1 year plus 1 day all the way up to life. And there's different levels of prisons too, from minimum security for first-time offenders, nonviolent first-time offenders, all the way up to supermax, which is people who are capable of horrific things. Now in jails, you're doing time under a year, but you're also being housed with people who are going to trial for anything and everything. Therefore, jails must be maximum security. Okay? Everybody got it? All right, cool. It really does put a damper on trying to get outside of your cell. I was in jail. I was housed in the nonviolent ring reserved for trustees. These are just people who are sentenced, and then you work for the county or the corrections officers, and you get reduced time off your sentence. We would do fun stuff. We would play poker. We used cut-up Uno cards as chips. 1 pack of ramen got you 40 chips, just in case you ever need to know that. On Sundays, this was fun. On Sundays, I want you guys to see it. On Sundays, a dorm of 150 convicts would pile into the TV room, and we would watch The Walking Dead. Like, it was our show. And if you talked during it, there was none of that. You would get hit in the back of the head. Shut the fuck up. We watched Cops. How, as a former athlete, I watched football. You better not talk to that cop. What are you doing? What are you doing? What is he doing? What is he doing? Idiot. I did have one Shawshank Redemption moment. First time I showered in jail, I walked to my cell naked. And then when I came out of my cell, an older man called me over to his bunk. He asked, "Why did you just walk to your cell naked?" And I was like, "Listen, man, I played sports my whole life. I grew up in locker rooms. I don't mind walking around naked." And that's when he enlightened me that that's seen as an open invitation for sexual assault. You probably don't do that again. So kind of like the Shawshank Redemption. I don't mean to make it sound lighthearted. There were truly fearful moments. While you're in jail, there is an abundance of moving around. They do it to level out the general population. And one such incident happened to me early into my incarceration. I was told to report to a very specific cell. When I got there were already 3 gentlemen in the 3-man cell. They told me that's not the cell I'm going to. I'm going to the other cell, 4 doors down. I kind of froze. I was panicked, when your ears get hot and you can't catch your breath. Because correctional officers do not respond to you making personal changes very well at all. So I didn't know if I should fight and claim my cell or if it really was no big deal. I just walked to the cell 4 doors down. I laid out my few belongings, and as I was struggling to get my thoughts together and catch my breath, the guard came in to do count. Now, this was the moment of truth. You would be so surprised what gets you more time added to your sentence once you're already inside. It's shocking, really. But it really was no big deal. He just noted the change. The fear in that moment is one of the things that I always keep in the back of my mind as a reminder. So much fear. In the most insignificant, seemingly unexpected places. I was released early for good behavior in December of 2013. Still sober, excited to get back on the track I was on. There we go. That's the. No, I wish that. No, I'm just kidding. How cool would it be if I was like, yeah, that's it, and I just, my life turned around and I came to New York? No, that's not. I really wish I could end the story there. One problem, though. I am an alcoholic. In May of 2014, after rehab, jail, living in a halfway house for close to a year, I moved out with a friend from the house. We got an apartment just a few streets away, but it was ours. My relationship with my girlfriend at the time was going great. She stayed with me, even after she found out I was an alcoholic, even when I had to reveal that I was living in a halfway house, even after I went to jail, she waited. She really loved me. My life had turned around and I had no intention to ever drink again. The next month, I ran into the owner of the halfway house. The first thing he asked was, "Are you still sober?" I was caught off guard by the question. Did you just hear everything I told you? Of course I am. It planted the seed, though. I could drink again. No one would stop me. It just took a few days later, and I was sitting on the balcony with my roommate, and we talked about maybe how we have overreacted by going to rehab and getting sober. Yeah. At the time, I'm only 25. I did have a very good job, and now I know what booze does to me. Hello. There's no way I could get too out of control. Now, with what I learned from rehab, we agreed we could drink again. In hindsight, it wasn't the question from the halfway house owner or the conversation with my roommate. I decided I could drink again. Me. I went to the liquor store around the corner from the house. I bought a handle of Smirnoff and a fifth of Sailor Jerry. And then I bought a case of beer for my roommate. Gross. When I got home, I poured shots out for myself, my girlfriend, and my roommate. And I took the shot, and there was that warmth going down my throat into my stomach. It's like a warm blanket on a cold night. And I walked out onto the balcony, lit a cigarette, noticed all the car lights were brighter. Everything was brighter. I vowed to keep it under control. I could not. I was experiencing a real disease, recognized by the American Medical Association and everything. By May of 2017, I had only gotten worse. I lived in a sustained haze of drunk or hungover, with short bouts of intermittent sobriety. My girlfriend of 2 years and fiance for a year and a half, my one and only someone, had finished college and our lease was up. Her lease was up. So she made the hardest decision she had to that point in her life, and she left me. She decided to move home to be with her family on the west coast of Florida. My world was shattered. When I was in jail, I would write her every day. And when I was released, I would keep that tradition going by leaving random notes around the house. I would always end them the same way. It's a line from the movie A Knight's Tale, Heath Ledger, classic. Love to the end, with hope. And now I was helping her pack a U-Haul full of stuff we got together to make our place our home. It was my fault. I knew it was my fault. So the least I could do is help pack and drive the truck. I have tried desperately to block it out since. But I remember thinking, there's no way this is the end to our story. It can't be. She stayed with me through everything I had put her through. And now it's just over? It was a 6-hour drive to her mother's house. And we talked and joked and sang like everything was going to be okay. Whenever there was tension in our relationship, I would always use comedy. And by comedy, I mean those really hacky, like joke book jokes. But whenever she was mad, babe, what? 2 muffins are sitting in an oven. One muffin turns to the other muffin and goes, man, it's really hot in here. So the other one goes, the talking muffin. Huh? You could really break the tension with that joke. When we got to our destination, and after I unloaded the truck, we sat around the dining room table and just continued to talk and joke with her whole family. I couldn't comprehend that this was the end. But it was. My second DUI came about a year after that. I wasn't even driving. Can you believe it? It was during a hurricane. This was Hurricane Irma. I don't know if anyone remembers that. It was a Category 4 storm. My work had closed for 5 days because they wanted everyone to stay safe in their homes. Well, by the second day of my vacation, I had run out of booze. So I decided to go to the local Walmart, which was only a mile away. How many times have you said to yourself, it's a mile away? Just me, a lot, all the time, all the time. They were closing, though, as I mentioned, Category 4 hurricane. And I was loud about not getting my medicine. They called the police, and police showed up. They told me to walk home because it was only a mile, and that if I got in my car, they would definitely arrest me. So I walked behind the store, and I hid. Didn't see the police, walked back, got into my car before I could even start the car. It was the same officer. I was arrested for a DUI at a Walmart in a parking lot during a hurricane, which is the most Florida sentence anyone can ever say. Have you ever been more of a public health hazard than a natural disaster? Because checkmate for me. This incident, though, was much more cut and dry than the last one. I did end up spending 5 days in jail, even though my older sister posted bail. But again, they weren't releasing anybody. Category 4 hurricane. No one was allowed to leave. But when I got out, I followed every single requirement to the letter, except the no drinking part. By May of 2018, I'd put a month together without drinking. And I was in my very own apartment. Small victories, everybody. Small victories. I was in my own apartment with no roommates. Because of my excessive drinking, my friends that I was living with kicked me out, but I was, older. I should have my own place. Yeah, glad you agree. I went to work on May 29th, 2018, my 30th birthday, like any other day when I wasn't drinking. The shift went well. I told a few tables it was my birthday. They always give you extra tip money when you tell them that. Sometimes it's not their birthday. Remember that when next time you go out to eat. I had no intention to drink that morning before work, during the shift, or even when I got home. I knew I was off for the next 2 days, so I was just going to relax, maybe go to some open mics, get back on stage for the first time in 3 years. As I sat on my couch reflecting on this new chapter that was 30, I became overwhelmed with happiness. For the place I was in. But then that shifted. I started to think, which for me turns into overthinking, about everything I had lost. Football, law school, comedy, friends, and of course, her. I thought about my twin sister. And how growing up, she was the one who would always get into trouble. But now, she was married with 2 beautiful children and a loving husband and a house that they owned. I had nothing. I was back in the same spot that I was for so long. Alone, trying to survive. The more I thought, the angrier I became with myself. So I decided to quiet the noise in my head, the only way I knew how. I would get a handle of Smirnoff and a pack of Newports. Just one more time. After a quick drive to the store, I came home and started drinking late that afternoon. I drank and drank and drank. This time the lights didn't get brighter. Nothing got brighter. The more I drank, the worse the pain got. So I kept drinking. I didn't care anymore about anyone or anything. I had no intention to stop. I came to at 7:30 in the morning on a Wednesday. My first bottle was almost gone. So I Googled a liquor store that opened at 8 a.m. And I Ubered there. So it only took 2 DUIs, but I learned. I knew I had 48 hours before I had to be back at work. So I was going to be fine. I was not fine. I blacked out somewhere towards the early evening on Wednesday, May 30th, 2018. The last lucid memory I have was throwing up in the bathroom. It was dark out. I saw an empty handle on the coffee table. And the other handle was half empty next to me. And I couldn't stop throwing up. And I would throw up, and then I would chug Smirnoff to try and settle my stomach, and then just throw up again. I was so tired. I was weak. My eyes were bloodshot. I remember looking into the mirror and saying out loud, You're now going to die. Just like this. Drunk. Scared. And all alone. And that's exactly what you deserve. That was the last thing I remember. Believe it or not, I wasn't a popular child in school. I was relentlessly bullied by older kids in my grade, even teammates. This was very demoralizing mentally. It pushed me to hurt myself so I could focus on something physical rather than mental. I was also very late compared to my siblings to drinking. By high school, they'd be going to parties with friends and drinking on occasion. I didn't get drunk for the first time until late into my senior year. When I did, though, I noticed my anxiety, my depression, my worry, it all washed away. And I thought, what is this magical elixir? I loved it. I opened my eyes on May 31st, 2018, to the bright fluorescent lights of a hospital room. Sitting next to the bed, crying, was one of my dearest friends, Marquise. I met him at my very first job, and he used to and still does. Tell me about how one day I will wake up and realize that we should be together forever. Still does it. We've been incredibly close for 2 decades. And there he was, crying. You see, Marquise was in Jacksonville visiting his older sister and insisted that while he was in town, he was going to visit me. So that Tuesday, my birthday, before I thought twice about it, I texted him my address and apartment number. Throughout the course of the day Wednesday, he had been texting me, but I wasn't responding. Obviously, like we're all tracking. Okay. Undeterred, Marquise decided he would drive to my apartment to see what was going on. He continued to call and text, but no response. He knocked on the door, which turned into banging, which turned into screaming. Still no response. He opened the door. And that's when he found me, unconscious and unresponsive on the bathroom floor. Through sheer will and adrenaline, he was able to wake me up enough to drag me to the car, and he rushed me to the ER. Now, I am the kind of person who always locks their front door. I walk in the door just out of force of habit and flick the lock. But for some out-of-character reason, when I got home from the early morning liquor store, I didn't. And that saved my life. As Marquise finished filling me in on the last 12 hours, a doctor walked into the room. He had a stunned look on his face. He told me I was lucky to be alive. People with that high of a blood alcohol content normally don't wake up that quickly. I informed the doctor that I had been training for this moment my entire life. That's right. I hate hospitals. So despite everyone's objections, I forced myself up and out of the hospital. Marquise drove me home, and he kept an eye on me for the next few days. And I haven't had a drop of alcohol since. I did die that day. A part of me died that day. The would-be husband died that day. The future lawyer died. The part of me that never deals with his problems died. And sometimes I do miss him. That's why I wrote this story. One of the best parts that did survive, though, was my sense of humor. My life is so much different now. I must deal with and face my problems head on. Since that day, I watched the love of my life marry someone else, gone through breakups, quit jobs. I even moved across the country, all sober. I dove headfirst back into comedy because when faced with death, I made a joke. I've always made jokes at the worst situations. Trying to make myself and others laugh at terrible times is what I love to do. It is my goal to give others like me hope, because in the beginning I had so little of it. The hope I have now, that if you do the work and just believe, it all works out just fine. Take it from me, I'm not even supposed to be here.